الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله. اللهم إني أسألك التوفيق والفتح والقبول في هذه الأيام. الحمد لله. The Sahih Bukhari is, I think, one of the great gifts of the Ummah. The Prophet ﷺ, his most important words were collected by this great Imam and put into this one book. And the Muslims have always, since the time this book really came out, and the Muslims have honored it in ways that it's been written beautifully. I had a handwritten manuscript from southern Morocco, from the Dilai Zawiya, and it was really beautiful, which I gave to a Hafidh of al-Bukhari as a gift, because he actually found a mistake in it. And I was compelled to give it to him at that point. But it really was one of the most precious things that I have ever possessed. The scholars have even said things like that, the house won't burn down if it has Sahih Bukhari in it, a ship won't go down. I used to actually fly with Sahih Bukhari. But Allah Ta'ala alam, those are, I think, hyperbolic statements to acknowledge the immense barakah that's in the book. But one of the most interesting, I think, aspects of the hadith is there's so many of them. And for that reason, people like Ibn Abi Jamrah chose to do his ikhtisar, to try to get at the khulasa of the book. And that's one of the reasons why there's so many mukhtasarat in our tradition, is that as the himma of the ummah declines, the need for these abridged versions become more important, because people don't have the time, the energy, or the aspiration to do what the early people did. And so, ولكن عن تطوير كلة الهمم فصار في اختصار ملتزم, like Imam Laqani says, that because the himam have diminished, abridgment becomes necessary. But even more extraordinary than an abridgment is to get to the actual very core of something. And Abu Dawood, radiallahu anhu, one of the great muhaddithun, he's in the 6 of the canonical collections. These are the 6 that the ummah recognized as being the most important collections, because there are many collections of the hadith. So Imam al-Bukhari obviously has a preeminence, and then Imam Muslim, who was his student, and then Imam Abu Dawood, radiallahu anhu, was also a student, and then Imam al-Tirmidhi, Imam al-Nasa'i, Ibn Majah, and sometimes the Muwatta is put alongside or in replacement of Ibn Majah's book. But Abu Dawood was one of the great muhaddithun, and he said that he collected over 500,000 hadith. And when you read that, like, it's Imam Malik knew over 100,000 hadith, Imam al-Bukhari 600,000 hadith. When you see these numbers, they're not the actual number of hadiths, but the different transmissions. So there's around 50,000 statements of the Prophet ﷺ that have been recorded between these various Sahih, Hasan, and then the different types of Da'if categorizations. But from those, there's about 7,000 that have really been transmitted in these books. Imam al-Bukhari has 4,000 without the mukarrar, without the repetition, because he repeats many hadith. In many babs, he will have, like, for instance, he repeats the hadith إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, because it's an important hadith, and it falls into many of the chapters. And this is why they say that Imam al-Awza'i أفتح بقال الله وقال رسول الله في أكثر من 70,000 مسألة. In more than 70,000 fatwas that he, in his lifetime. Again, these, Allahu Alam, sometimes they can be exaggerations, but sometimes not. In any case, I asked a Mauritanian, how's that possible? And he said, how many are answered with innamal a'malu binniyat, right? So, I mean, I had somebody yesterday wrote me about, he unfortunately had broken his fast. He was traveling and he broke his fast leaving before he left his house, right? And so then he was asking, he wrote me an email and said, you know, do I have kafara? Because somebody told him, oh, you have to fast for 2 months because you broke your fast without, but first of all, kafara, you have to have knowledge of it, right? But secondly, there are differences of opinions. Like Ibn Wahb said that if you were traveling, you could start your taqsir from the home. That's not the mashhur of the madhab. It's not the dominant opinion, but it is an opinion. So when you have difficulties, you want to find ease for people. The great Abu Sufyan, he said, "Al-fiqhu rukhsatun an thiqa, wa amma tashdid fayahsinuhu kullu ahad." Like that, real fiqh is giving people dispensations, giving them licenses, making things easy from a source that's sound. In other words, it can't just be لأن يريد الله بكم اليسر. And so that's a really important aspect of the religion. And then he said, but as for making things difficult, everybody is capable of doing that. So we just, there was a fatwa from a mufti of a major Muslim country who gave a fatwa. They sent it to me, some of the muftis on the other side of the pond, that they give a fatwa that, oh, you can't give zakat al-fitr with naqd because it's not the sunnah. And that's true, but it's a rukhsa from a thiqa. And so for a lot of people, it would be hard to do that. So it's very important to recognize that about the religion. You can't make things hard, especially in this time when things are hard enough for people just to be alive. Like people have a very difficult time in the modern world in ways that the pre-modern world, which was difficult, and I've lived in pre-modern environments. I lived in West Africa. I spent a lot of time in southern Morocco. I was in the Ruba' al-Khali. I've been to places that are very far from this modern world. It's much easier to practice your religion in those environments. Tahajjud is not a problem in West Africa. Everybody does it. It's just normal. But for people here that are stressed out, go to work, you know, we have our ease. There's aspects of modern life that's very easy, but then there's other aspects that are really difficult. And so in a time like this is a time to try to facilitate to people as much as possible without compromising your deen. And then wara' is something that if somebody's capable of it, it's a good thing to be scrupulous. So Imam Abu Dawood, he said, انتخبت من 500,000 حديثا, from 500,000 hadith, he said, جعلته في هذا الكتاب, meaning the Sunan of Abu Dawood. He said, from 500,000 hadith, I put these hadiths in his Sunan. And he said, but from all of these hadiths, it's over 5,000, from all of these hadiths, he said, يكفي المرأة لدينه أربعة. 3 of them are in al-Bukhari. He said it's enough for a person to have four hadiths and to practice these hadiths. So this is coming from, and there's other, Imam Ahmad has a similar statement. He reduced it to 3 hadiths. Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, the great Maliki scholar, reduced it also to 4 hadiths. They agreed on 2 of them. They differed on 2. So, but they're all looking at the same thing. And this is like when you take a statement like the great Imam al-Razi, he said you could reduce Islam to ibadat al-khaliq wa khidmat al-khalq, you know, to worshiping Allah and serving Allah's creation, like helping Allah's creation. That you can sum up Islam in that way. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he said all of Islam is adala, maslaha, right, rahma, like all of these things, and adala. So he reduced Islam to those four, like maslaha. So he said, إذا انتقلت إلى مفسدة ليس من الإسلام. If it goes to something that's negative, it's not from Islam. Adala, if it goes to إذا انتقل إلى الجور ليس من الإسلام. And that's why istihsan is important in fiqh. Because sometimes a hukm, a ruling, can actually lead to something that's unfair. And so that can't be from Islam. So the faqih says, this can't be right. And so he'll actually make a hukm, a ruling, based on a more just or equitable solution to a problem. I mentioned, just to give you an example, I mentioned once Sheikh Abdullah, we were talking about community property in the West. And he said from a Sharia point of view, it would be unjust for a woman to take half a man's wealth on divorce. So I said, well, here's the way they think about it. So this is when a woman is at home, she's doing all this work. She's taking care of the person's house. She's doing taking care of the children, doing all these things. Then when she gets divorced, what does she have? She can go out without anything. And so they say that it's not fair that the man who, part of why he was able to do what he was doing was that he had somebody taking care of the. This is the original thing. I mean, obviously today things have changed because women are working now, and there are a lot of single mothers and all these different things. But this was the original understanding of community property. And he said, istihsanan hada lahu wajh. You know, from the point of view of istihsan, that there's some validity to that view. Because, for instance, khidma batina, in the Maliki madhab, a woman can charge for khidma batina. Like for doing domestic service, she can actually charge her husband if he doesn't provide for her some help. And then you have, in pre-Islamic societies, you had a very different world where people took care of each other. Now we have women who have children, they don't have the infrastructure that a traditional society provides, like having an extended family, you know, having aunts that'll take the children when the woman needs a break. Or in Mauritania, a good example, the little children, when they're 3, 4 years old, they just walk around the encampment and go to different tents. So the mother's not constantly having to look after them. They're looked after by the whole clan. And that was very normal. So one of the things Dr. Cleary pointed out, which really struck me when I read this, he wrote a really beautiful essay called How Islam Can Revive American Civilization. And in there, one of the things he said is that the family is so important in Islam because it's one of the 5 universals, hifdhu an-nasl, or family, protecting the family. And he said people think the family's breaking down because of divorce. Is the family broke down 100 years ago with the breakdown of extended families. Like, divorce is the last line of family. Like, that's not a real family, a mother, a father, and children. That's not a family. A family is uncles and aunts and grandparents and nephews and cousins. That's a real family. So that if it goes to, and then he said, if it goes from rahmah to harshness, then it's not from Islam, because Islam is rahmah. So if it go, and even Imam Malik, and I think Imam Malik was musib in this, he had the correct view. He said that jihad is not a niqmah, it's a rahmah. That was his view. He said it wasn't a punishment for the kufr or for fighting the Muslims or something like that. It was actually a rahmah to stop them from doing more harm than they were doing. So he saw it as a mercy, because the more harm people do, the more trouble they make for themselves. So these 4 things he described. So Abu Dawud took the hadith, and remember, this is a man who knew pretty much all of al-Bukhari, all of Muslim. I mean, he knew the hadith corpus of his time. He was a hafidh. So if he's going to reduce it down, he was also noted for his brilliance because he's one of the fuqaha amongst the muhaddithun. He's considered a faqih. So the first one he said is إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. The second one he said was مِنْ حُسْنِ إِسْلَامِ الْمَرْءِ تَرْكُهُ مَا لَا يَعْنِيهِ. The third one he said الْحَلَالُ بَيِّنٌ وَالْحَرَامُ بَيِّنٌ. And the fourth one was لا يرضى لا يكون مؤمنا حتى يرضى لنفسه ما يرضى لأخيه, or in the riwayah يحب حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. So those were the four that he said. So I thought it would be useful to look at these four hadiths because what he's saying is they're all you need. If you get these right, then you have from the sunnah what you need. The first one is the one that Imam Muslim starts his book with. عن أمير المؤمنين أبي حفص عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته لدنيا يصيبها أو امرأة يتزوجها أو ينكحها في رواية فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. And then he says رواه إمام المحدثين أبو عبد الله محمد ابن إسماعيل ابن إبراهيم ابن المغيرة ابن بردزباه الجعفي البخاري الجعفي وأبو الحسين مسلم ابن الحجاج ابن مسلم القشيري النيسابوري رضي الله عنهما في صحيحيهما اللذين هما أصح الكتب المصنفة. So this hadith is from Amir al-Mu'mineen Umar. Abu Hafs. Hafsa is his daughter. Hafs is the masculine form of that. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, and he's from the Khattab family. These were the great judges of the Quraysh, this family, and noted for their khataba, so hence al-Khattab. They still have it in the Mujaddidis are famous for their oratory, so these things get genetically transmitted, alhamdulillah. So he says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, and in riwayah niyah. So actions are by intentions. So an action is something that's done with the jawarih, right? One of the things, and we'll get this with tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi, a lot of people forget that speech is an action. People say, oh, that's just talk, as if talk doesn't have meaning. I mean, I heard somebody say that once, and the problem with the Muslim, it's all words. There's no action. The Prophet came with words. I mean, they're the kalimatullah. That's what he brought. So don't ever diminish the meaning of words by saying it's just words. Because words are what make us human. Words are what give us our distinction amongst creation. The fact that we have language, that we're the haywan al-natiq. Somebody said to me, oh, we're animals. I said, we're not animals. He said, Imam al-Ghazali said we're animals. I said, what did he say? He said we're part animal, part angel. I said, so why didn't you say we're angels? Part animal is not animal, right? It's not animal. We're khalqan akhar. ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. We made them a distinct creation. So we're not animals. And the people that say that, these are materialists that want to reduce us to animals. I mean, I have cats. I watch cats. I was looking at my cat today. He was looking at me, and I was printing something, and I was just wondering what he was thinking I was doing. But he can't work out that I'm printing something on the printer. I can't talk to him about infinity. I can't have a conversation. If I did, it'd be a one-sided conversation. He might meow every once in a while, but he's not going to be reflecting on proofs for the existence of God. It's just not going to happen. Dolphins, Allahu A'lam, we're not supposed to eat them. And Imam Layth said, لا تأكلوا إنسان الماء. Don't eat the insan al-ma. Don't eat the human of the ocean. So Allahu A'lam, if some people think because they have very big brains, they have a brain similar to humans apparently. So Allahu A'lam what they're up to. If they're debating whether does God exist or not, well, who made this ocean? Allahu A'lam, we don't know. But Imam Malik said, they asked him about it, and he said, "Antum samaytumuhu khinzira." You named it because it's also called the pig of the ocean, khinzir al-bahr, because it has like a snout, like a pig. So the Greeks called it the pig also. So actions are by intention. So what is an intention? An intention is the root of the word has to do with seed. Like a Noah is a seed. So an intention is the seed of your actions. It's what produces the action. Like if you look at this amazing backdrop that our brother Ismail did from hand, taking wood from a tree. That was once, those were trees in a forest somewhere. And somebody went and cut them down. There's a beautiful essay really proving how miraculous just a pencil is. Because we don't think about these things. So if you look like just the wood, what was the intention of the man cutting down the wood? It wasn't to be a mihrab in California, right? Somebody in South America who went in with an axe or maybe a machine and cut down. He wanted to make some money. Maybe to feed his family. We don't know what his niyyah was, but he had a niyyah. And so then he sends it to the lumber and they make it into sheets. What was their niyyah? Probably to make money. And then the man who bought it just to ship it somewhere to sell it for a higher price, he had a different niyyah. He didn't cut it down. And then it goes to some warehouse somewhere. And then Ismail says, I'm going to make this out of mahogany. He could have made it out of other woods, but he chose that wood. So that wood was destined then to be that. But what was his niyyah? It wasn't money. That was maybe part of it because that's his livelihood. He wanted to make something for Allah. That was his niyyah. What was the niyyah of those of us here who we wanted to adorn Allah's house. To make it something beautiful, so that when people come in, they get a sense of Inna Allah Jamilun Yuhibbul Jamal. Allah is beautiful and loves beauty, and so beauty evokes things in people's hearts. So those niyyahs were all different. What was the niyyah of the person who originally made this geometric pattern? These are the tessellations of the Muslim world that are famous, replicable patterns. There's a great Russian mathematician who worked out there's only 17 possible infinitely replicable tessellations, these geometric patterns. 14 of them are in the Alhambra Palace. So they missed 3. What was their intention? Why were Muslims so obsessed with infinite replications? They were trying to show unity in diversity. They were trying to show the one in the many. So there's a reason why when you go into masjids, they have geometric patterns, because there was a symbolism in it that they wanted to evoke in the people that were looking on it, to make them think about these things. So actions are by intention, so that what is the seed? What is the intention of your action? And this is like in our tradition, you make, wasa'il, you don't have to make intention. But those things that are maqasid, like the prayer, you have to intend the prayer. And you have to attend what prayer it is. Like you should have the intention of dhuhr, because it's different from asr. So it's a distinct act of ibadah. But the wasa'il, you don't. So like, when you give sadaqah, or when you, or on your way to the, to get money to pay your zakat, you don't have to make the niyyah to go get the money. That's a wasila to paying the zakat. But when you pay the zakat, so the intention is very important in your actions, right? If you just have the irada, then that's part of the intention also, because niyyah and irada are related. In the Quran, there's يُعَبِّرُ عَنْهُ بِالِابْتِغَاء, وَمَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ ابْتِغَاء مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ, لَا خَيْرَ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِّن نَجْوَاكُمْ إِلَّا مَنْ أَمَرَ بِصَدَقَةٍ أَوْ مَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ إِصْلَاحٍ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. So whoever does that, ibtigha mardatila, if you do it, that's where you're going to get the reward. But you don't have to specifically make that niyyah, I'm going to do amr bin ma'ruf, or I'm going to do islah bayn al-nas. You don't have to make that niyyah. The action itself is enough. So, وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. Every person has what they intended in their action. فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. So the Prophet عَبَّرَ عن an action. He could have chosen any action, but this is a very important action. Why are you moving from one place to another? So whoever immigrates to Allah and His Messenger, in other words, intending Allah and His Messenger, right? His niyyah is to Allah and His Messenger. You're doing it for the sake of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. His hijrah is to Allah and His Messenger. وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا أَوْ إِمْرَأَةٍ يَتَزَوَّجُهَا. And also the Prophet tended to use the female because he was speaking generally to men. He had one day out of the week where he spoke solely to the women, but generally he was speaking to the men with the understanding that they would convey that to their women folk. And so he spoke with that understanding, but they would convey that with the understanding it's also for, if a woman does that, to marry a man. So it goes both ways. So that's important. It's not sexist language. I mean, this is kind of a modern concept of, like, for instance, in Persian, you don't have the problem with the gender, right? Because the Persians, there's no gender in the pronominal reference. If you use a pronoun in Persian, it's all the same, he or she. In Arabic, huwa is also not masculine. Like huwa could be used for something that's neutral. It could be used for feminine. It could be used, so that's a problem when you translate into English, because English is very specific. We have he, she, it. Whereas in Arabic, they don't have it. They have huwa for it and he. And in some time, it could be also she, like the Quran uses the masculine to mean the feminine in the Quran. So what's amazing about this, the Prophet ﷺ said, if it's for dunya, some worldly thing to achieve it, or a spouse to marry, فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. He didn't repeat, like in the first one he repeated. He said, إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, because of the sharaf of the hijrah. But because the second one is dunya, he just said, إِلَى مَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. It didn't warrant repeating. So he just used ma to say what. And that comes from a famous miskin who became known as Muhajir Qais. He actually made hijrah to marry. The woman told him, I won't marry you unless you make hijrah to Medina. So he made hijrah to Medina. So he became known as Muhajir Qais. That was his niyyah. This is very important. It's a foundational hadith. The second hadith that he mentions is an Abdullah Nu'man ibn Bashir, who was a very young. And the hadith of putting the feet together, which unfortunately is in the last, people don't do it anymore, but when I was younger, the people became obsessed with this thing of putting the feet next to each other in the prayer. and you had this problem. Like people would actually do it, and it became very annoying. But some people, because they found this hadith in Sahih Bukhari, which was on Nu'man ibn Bashir, and he said, the Prophet said, taraso, come together. So he said, we used to put our feet next to each other. They were in the last saf, the children. He was a child. He was in the back with like Anas. And so they probably took it literally, and that's what they did. But that is, hadith is not ma'mul. It's not acted on. And there's nothing in our books that say that, to put the feet next to the feet. There is in one of the commentaries it says that they did this, but if you tried to do it today, the person would run away from you like a scared animal. So Allahu A'lam. But I think people who have experienced that know how distracting it can be for somebody. So Nu'man ibn Bashir radiyallahu anhuma, because both of them, Bashir was also a Sahabi, قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. So he said the halal is clear. إن الحلال بين وإن الحرام بين. The halal is clear. The haram is clear. وبينهما أمور مشتبهات. Between the two, the halal and haram, are gray areas. مشتبهات. اشتبهت علي. It's something that there's a shubha in it. Shubha is something, it's hazy, it's doubtful. It resembles one or the other. It can resemble both, have elements. Yushbihu means to resemble something. So he's saying, لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس. The majority of people don't know how to differentiate between these two. The ones that do are the rasikhun fil ilm, the people that are firmly established in knowledge. And so he says, لا يعلمهن كثير من الناس فمن اتقى الشبهات, whoever protects himself from these shubuhat, استبرأ لدينه وعرضه. He has guarded he's protected, he's kept pure. Bara'a is like innocence. Al-bara'at al-asli is the foundation, that things aren't, the permissibility is foundational in things. It's free of impurities or prohibition. لدينه وعرضه. So what is the ird? The ird is one of the 5 mahfudat of deen, nafs, mal, aqal, and nasal. Nasal is included in that ird, and some added as a 6th in the mahfudat. So you have religion, protection of life, protection of property, protection of intellect, protection of family, and then in that is also protection of honor, because your family is part of your honor, which is one of the reasons why people don't go by last names anymore, is because of the loss of family. People used to always go by last name. And you see this in Jane Austen's novels. They always call people by like Willoughby. His name was John Willoughby, but they called him Willoughby. Why? Because they were referring to his family. In our tradition, the kunya is to remind the father that he's an exemplar of the son. Ya Aba Yahya, Ya Aba Anas. It's to remind the father that he's an exemplar to his son, and to remind the son that he carries the honor of his father. So you're not just on your own. You actually represent a family. And this is why traditionally everybody went by last names. You did not call somebody by their first name because it was too informal. You had to get to know somebody before they would let you in on that intimacy. But when family's lost, then everybody's just by their first name, because the family doesn't mean anything. And this is one of the great tragedies. The high school I went to, all the teachers called us by our last name. They never called us by our first name. And many of the students had parents who had gone to that high school and grandparents. Because family, you carry your family's name, and if you dishonor your family, and that's why illegitimacy is so terrible, because they don't even know who their father is. So that's why there's so much criminality in illegitimate societies. Because there's, what are you upholding? You know, the name, the good name. My father's teacher, Mark Van Doren, his son was Charles Van Doren, who I actually knew and had correspondence with. He got caught up in a scandal in 1958. It was the quiz show scandal. And he was from, this family is a very distinguished family. There was Mark Van Doren, Carl Van Doren, and these were great literary scholars in America, poets, Pulitzer Prize winning poets. So when his son was found out to be cheating on this quiz show, it had a huge crisis in the family because he soiled his name. His father gave him a good name, and that's one of the best things that your father can give you is a good name. And the worst thing you can do to your father or your mother is to soil that name. I mean, these are something in the Muslim world they know. The Mujaddidi has a meaning. And so when somebody soils the name of the Mujaddidis by doing things that are wrong, they soil the whole Mujaddidi clan. And that's a crime against the clan. And it's a crime against Umar. And Umar ibn al-Khattab will take care of them on the Day of Judgment. He's not going to intercede for people that soiled his name, I don't think. I mean, he punished, children of the Sahaba. He didn't have a problem punishing them. I mean, one of the great Sahaba's son was an alcoholic, and he punished him. That's one of the things in the Hamziya he says about Omar. He said the Qarib and the Ba'id were the same to Omar. Taqwa was what distinguished his judgment on them. So that's really important to remember that about, So the ird is really important. And that's why it's so horrible to tell lies about people, to slander people, to libel people, to accusations. Qadh is one of the major sins in our religion, and it has a had punishment. Slandering somebody, slandering the mu'minat, and the innocent believing women. To slander them, to say something about their. I mean, this is a really serious thing. And so then he says, وَمَنْ وَقَعَ فِي الشُّبُهَاتِ وَقَعَ فِي الْحَرَامِ كَالرَّاعِ يَرْعَى حَوْلَ الْحِمَى يُوشِكُ أَنْ يَرْتَعَ فِيهِ. Like the ra'i who يَرْعَى حَوْلَ الْحِمَى, like a shepherd who is taking his flock near a hima. The hima is the sanctuary. So if you take the flock near the sanctuary, yushik an yarta'a fi, it's going to end up eating from that grass that's prohibited. So the hima was the sanctuary of a king. If people who know Western tradition, in the Robin Hood story, it's a very famous Sherwood Forest, which is where they hid and hunted. That was actually a sanctuary of the king. But the king was unjust, and so Robin Hood and his merry band of men had no problems hunting, and they thought this is very Western, like Cromwell. He said rebellion against tyrants is obedience to God. That's Cromwell. That's not necessarily the Sunni position, right? Patience is traditionally the Sunni position with tyrants. You have to be patient because rebelling against them makes it worse. So he says, أَلَا وَإِنَّ لِكُلِّ مَلِكٍ حِمَى. Every king has a sanctuary. أَلَا وَإِنَّ حِمَى اللَّهِ مَحَارِمُهُ. The sanctuary of Allah are those maharim. This is why إِنَّ الْحَلَالَ بَيِّنٌ وَإِنَّ الْحَرَامَ بَيِّنٌ. So there's a clear demarcation The Quran has very clear demarcation of mat'umat, mankuhat. These are very clearly articulated in the Quran, what's prohibited, right? The mayta, the dam, the lahm al-khanzir, ma uhilla li ghayrillah. These are very clear. In the Maliki madhab of all the madhabs, it's the one that has the least amount of prohibitions, because Malik took Nas al-Quran. So he sees these as muhkama, and the hadith he takes more as for karahiyah. So in the Malik madhab, and muharram, and nijis, anything that's nijis, like carrion, things like that. And then khinzirun, baghlun, farasun, wahshiyun, himarun, wahshiyan, walau wahshiyan dajan, even if it was a wild donkey who is domesticated. Those are the meats that are prohibited. The other ones like cat, and that's why Imam Zamakhshari famously said, "In kuntu malikiyan qalu bi annani ubihu lahum akal al-kilabi wa hum humu." He said, "La abuh an madhabi." I don't tell people my madhab, because if I tell them, they're going to find some fault in it. And he said, if I say I'm Maliki, they say, oh, he permits eating dogs, which is not true, but there's karahiyya as opposed to tahrim, although there's an opinion in the Maliki madhab that it's also muharram. There's room for everybody, except the pig eaters. They have to give that up. Yeah. I heard that Maududi used to say to Hindu converts, did you eat beef yet? Which I don't think is that's kind of harsh, but because they have family. Yeah. Apparently Akbar, he did not allow Muslims to eat beef during his time. And that's when a lot of Hindus became Muslim. Because there's absolutely no tradition that the Prophet ate beef. In fact, there's a Sahih hadith where he said beef, luhumuha da'un wa albanuha shifa. The meat of beef is a disease, and the milk is a cure. That's a Sahih hadith. It's a mushkil, because Ibrahim alayhi salam brought the ijal, veal. He served veal to his and then amazing ending here. وإن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد أو صلوح كلاهما. For the students of Arabic, the afsah is with fath al-ain, so صلح in this, although صلح is valid. إذا صلحت, so the mudgha, there's a lump of flesh in the body of the human being. إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله. If it's sound, the whole body is sound, and if it's corrupt, the whole body is corrupt. ألا وهي القلب, isn't it the heart? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ was asked about the best people, and he said مخموم القلب, the one who's مخموم القلب. الطاهر النقي, التقي النقي, مخموم القلب. And they said, we know taqi and naqi, what's مخموم القلب? And he said, the pure heart. خممت البيت means to sweep the house. So مخموم القلب is a heart that has been swept, like it's been cleaned out. You've swept your heart. You've cleared out all of the aghyar. So very, very important hadith. And many, these can, whole books have been written literally on these hadiths. So the next one is عن أبي حمزة أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنهم خادم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. This is عن. So Allahu alam, did he hear it from him, or did he hear it from another Sahabi? قال لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. Rawahu al-Bukhari and Muslim. So this is muttafaqun alayh. When you have al-Bukhari and Muslim agree on the hadith, it's very strong. It's usually the next after, the mutawatir hadith is, then you get the ones that the six agree on, because there are hadiths that all six relate. But muttafaqun alayh is a very high rutbah. So this hadith is لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه. None of you truly believes, and we put truly there because it can't mean لا يؤمن, because that would mean that if you didn't love for your brother what you love for yourself, you weren't a believer. So it's understood to mean لا يكمل إيمان أحدكم. The iman of one of you is not complete. There's a hadith of Ibn Mas'ud said that ليس مستقبل الإيمان من لم يعد البلاء نعمة والنعمة بلاء. That you're not a believer until you see a tribulation as a blessing and a blessing as a tribulation. In other words, your iman is not complete. That's a high maqam to see that. To where, because everything's from Allah, and so you see it as this is taha. There's only two possibilities. Like Gaza right now, there's two possibilities. It's a dhulm from these people, undeniably. The dhulm is wadih, and there's no arguing that. And those people who are inflicting this cruelty on these people, they will be judged. They've already been judged in the dunya, but they will be judged in the akhirah. But for us, when we see these things as we experience it existentially, as an individual, as a human being, what does it mean for that individual, for Abdullah, who's there right now, or Khadija, or it's either rafa' darajat or tahara min al-dhunub. It's one or the other. It's elevated in maqam with Allah, or it's removing sins. And we believe that. That's our belief. And if you lose that, you will fall into despair, because then it becomes purposeless. And that's why in the emotional equations of this book that Zain gave me, the equation for despair was suffering minus meaning equals despair. Suffering minus meaning equals despair. All suffering in our tradition, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرُهُ كُلُّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. Everything that happens to a believer is good. Everything. And children are أَلَمْ يَرَوْا إِلَى مَا الْأَطْفَالَ وَشِبْهُ فَحَذَرًا مِحَالًا. Like children suffer in this world. One of the most extraordinary things about suffering children, and those of us who've been in the healthcare, I had to do rotations in pediatrics when I was a nurse. One of the most amazing things about children, no child that's 6 or 7 or 8 years old with cancer is saying, why me? They just don't do it. And if they do, it's from their parents. But they will not do that naturally. They just accept it. And there's Levasseur, there's an amazing book by a French, he was a freedom fighter who was blind. And his book, Then There Was Light. It's a very interesting book. But he wrote this book. His job amongst the freedom fighters was to interview potential freedom fighters. Now they'd be called terrorists. The French, like if the Nazis won the war, they would be the terrorists. That's the way it works. But they, at that time anyway, they still considered them freedom fighters. But they were blowing things up. They were killing Nazis. So these were like the resistance. So his job was to interview people, and he could always detect the insincerity in the voice. He ended up getting betrayed, and he wrote in his book that he had doubt about the man. It was the only time he let somebody go because he fooled him, but he did have some doubt about him, and he ended up betraying him. He got arrested. He went to a concentration camp. In any case, in the first chapter of that book, it really struck me. He had lost his sight as a child. He had thick glasses, and a kid pushed him on the playground, and they landed and took out his eyes. The glass shattered, took out his eyes. He said, I thank God that this happened to me as a child, because people tend to get very angry when they're adults, whereas for me, it was just something that happened. It's an amazing statement. Yeah. So Hamza, Abu Hamza, Anas ibn Malik, he was very young. He came into the Prophet ﷺ's care, and he relates this hadith: none of you truly believes until he loves for his, and this really should be fellow man, because Shabrakhiti, Imam Nawawi in his, I had an original edition of the Sharh Arba'in Nawawiyah, and Imam Nawawi says, وَهَذَا يَشْمَلَ الْيَهُودِ وَالْمُشْرِكِ الْيَهُودِ وَالنَّصْرَانِ وَالْمُشْرِكِ. And then I got a later one. We were reading it with Tarif al-Urabi years ago, and it didn't have that in it. I said, what happened? My edition has that in it. But it was a new edition where they took it out for political reasons. It's amazing. Because they don't want to think, that we want good for Jews. The Jews are the children of prophets. Like, you don't think Yaqub would be upset about his children going, to hell or something? Adam alayhi salam, in the hadith, he says that in the hadith, when he saw Adam on the Isra and the Mi'raj, one of the visions that he had of Adam was he would look to his right and smile, and look to his left and cry. And behind him he couldn't make them out. They were like shadows. And so he asked Jibreel, and he said, the people on the left are his children that are for paradise, and the people on the right, and the people on the left are his disobedient children that go to hell. He cried when he saw them. So all of these, and that's why Safiya, when the Prophet ﷺ, when one of the wives said, called her Yahudiya, or said that they were better than her because, they were related to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, why didn't you say to them, my uncle is Moses, my father is Aaron, she was an Aaronite, and my husband is Muhammad. In other words, that's a good thing. So if a Jewish person becomes Muslim, there's a sharaf in having the lineage of the prophets in your, right? So he said, Yashmal al-Yahudi wa Nasrani, like you should want for them guidance. So that's, لا يستكمل إيمانه. His iman's not complete until that he loves for himself what he loves for others. It's a really important hadith. And he says, Sheikh Abu Amr ibn Salah, he says, هذا قد يعد من الصعب الممتنع وليس كذلك. Some people will think this is impossible, but that's not the truth. He said, لا يكمل إيمان أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه في الإسلام ما يحب لنفسه والقيام بذلك يحصل بأن يحب له حصولا مثل ذلك من جهة لا يزاحمه فيها بحيث لا ينقص رأي شيء من النعمة. So there he's reducing it down to your brother in Islam. But the great Imams, they said it includes humanity. Like you should want for others guidance. Yeah, it's a higher maqam. Because then if you make it provincial, I was born into a Christian family. Alhamdulillah, min Allah alayya bil Islam. And there were people who gave me da'wah. I read the Quran before I met Muslims, but there were people that gave me da'wah, that wanted me to become Muslim. And that's one of the things that I think our community has been really remiss about, especially in the United States. There's not a concern. And then part of the problem is some of the people that do da'wah don't do it knowing the people, because you have to have lisan qawmi. You have to have the tongue of the people. Every messenger that came with the tongue of the people. Like you have to understand the people and how they think. And one of the most amazing people is Abd al-Haq al-Aqili. He was this, he's a very famous Swedish painter who studied in France under some of the great Impressionists. He's considered one of the great Impressionist painters, but his father was a veterinarian, and he, maybe you could just look at what his name is in his Swedish name, Abd al-Haq al-Aqili, Swedish painter, Muslim. But his father was a veterinarian, and he taught him to love animals. So when he was in France studying painting, and painters like poets and others are very sensitive people. You can't be an artist without having a level of sensitivity that normal people don't have. So these are Van Gogh, poor man, cut off his ear. I mean, Van Gogh suffered a lot, and as lovers often do. So when they introduced bullfighting into France from Spain, he went to the bullfight and shot the matador. Like, how does it feel? He shot him in the leg. And he went, what's his name? Yeah, but what was his Swedish name? Yeah, Leif Carlson. No, that's somebody else. This is somebody else. He's still alive. No, this man died a long time ago. In any case, he went to prison, but there were so many animal rights people that they petitioned to get him out. But when he was in prison, he was in jail with an Algerian who recited the Quran all the time. And that was his cellmate. And so because he was reciting Quran all the time, they ended up having all these conversations about Islam. He ended up becoming Muslim. And he went to Egypt, entered into Al-Azhar, studied with Abdurrahman Ulaysh, and became a scholar. He's a Maliki faqih. He studied Khalil and then, but the reason I bring him up is because the most amazing thing that I read about him, which really floored me, was he wanted to take Islam back to Europe, but he wanted to see how Islam manifested in a non-Muslim land. So he went to study the Indian Muslims before he went to, because Arabs have their way, but he wanted to see if the non-Arabs had other ways of being Muslim. So he went and studied the Muslims of India before he went back to Europe to do da'wah. Yeah, Ivan Aghili, that's his name. Sheikh Abd al-Hadi al-Aqili. Sorry, not Abd al-Hadi al-Aqili. Yeah. So Ivan Aghili, this man, he died in 1917. He was struck by a train, unfortunately. Yeah. But it was amazing man. Amazing. He actually was the one that introduced René Guénon into, who ended up writing some important books. But so he went and studied Islam in India to take it back. All of his paintings hang in the National Museum in Sweden. He's considered a national treasure in Sweden, and he's amongst, like Monet, there's these great Impressionist painters, the Pointillists and things. He's considered one of the great Impressionist painters. So that's really, really important, that one. And then, so then this last hadith, which to me is one of the most important hadiths. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. This hadith is a hadith that Imam al-Tirmidhi relates. And Imam al-Tirmidhi, radiallahu anhu, Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi, was from Tirmidh, which is in Central Asia, or it's also Tarmad with a fatha and Turmud. So there's like different ways of pronouncing it. Apparently they pronounce with a fatha traditionally. It was Tirmidhi. Yeah. But he's known as Imam al-Tirmidhi with a kasra. Another one of the great, he was a student of Imam al-Bukhari's. He had a photographic memory. And he could just hear it one time, and it was with him. And these were people, Allah hayya'ahum, He prepared them to carry this religion. But this hadith is a very foundational hadith. Abu Hurairah relates it, and Ibn Abi Zayd said it was, Imam Ahmad and Ibn Abi Zayd put it in their choice of the most important hadiths. This hadith, almost all of the problems on this planet come from this problem of being concerned with what's of no concern to you. Minding your own business. It's such a difficult thing for human beings to do. Everybody wants to put their nose in other people's business. Ahmed Zarruq said, the door of peril, of destruction, is opened by saying, how's so-and-so? It's like, yiftahu bab al-halak, you know, like just how's so-and-so? Because why are you asking how's so-and-so? Because very often people ask hoping something's wrong with so-and-so. You know, it's a very common thing that people do. So, and then why are people obsessed with, why is there a whole section on the news feed on the royal family? Like, well, what is that? You know, and then all the clickbait. So, Al-Hakim Samarqandi, who was one of the students of Imam al-Maturidi, Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, the great mutakallim, Imam al-Ghazali said that he said, كل الفتن تنشأ عن ثلاث. All of the calamities in this dunya are for three reasons. طالب الأخبار, ناقل الأخبار, ومتلقي الأخبار. People seeking news, so we would call those news hounds, news junkies. People spreading news, so we'd call those newscasters. And متلقي الأخبار, people receiving news. And he said, وَلَا يَخْلُصُ أَحَدُهُمْ عَنِ الْمَلَامَةِ. None of them are free of the blame. And this is what this is about. You know, it's like, أَقْبِلْ عَلَى شَأْنِكَ. Concern yourself with yourself. But if you get outside of that into these other areas, you're going to be complicit in crimes unimaginable. And people don't think about this. They don't think about the ethical reality of just being alive here. You know, I have a son, I don't know where he got this from, but he will not buy anything that's not made locally or in the and it's very interesting because we don't think about that. Like, we get these cheap clothes. CNN had a report where the average American has 50 slaves working for them around the world, just to supply our lifestyles, right? So you're wearing clothes that were manufactured in sweatshops, but they're cheap. You know, there was a documentary called The High Cost of Low Prices. People don't think about that, of buying local, of small scale businesses, because all these corporations, you know, they'll go where it's cheapest, where they can exploit the workers, where there's no labor laws. That's what they do. Labor is really important. Work is important. And one of the problems with our lifestyles is that everybody wants to live. We'd need, for the world to live like the average American lives, you'd need 3 Earths to provide the resources for it. It's unsustainable. So this hadith is such an important hadith, just to really preoccupy yourself with what concerns you. You know, to work on yourself, to not worry about other people. أقبل على شأنك. And that's why, that was Imam Malik when Imam Shafi'i asked him how old he was. Because that's a curiosity for people. I wonder how old he is. And he just said, "Aqbal ala sha'nak," mind your own business. Which might seem harsh, but it was a great lesson to him, because he would say that whenever anybody asked him how old he was. So he got the point. And Malik said, if you tell somebody your age, they'll either say, "Oh, I thought you were younger than that," or "Oh, I thought you were older than that." Like, it's never work out. Yeah, apparently the Hunzas add 20 years to their age or something. That's why, they said the Hunzas are the oldest living people, but they get to a certain age, they just add a decade or something. So when they're 80, they say they're 90 and say, "Yo, you look great." So, min husni Islam al-mar'i, from the beautiful Islam of a person is that they leave what does not concern them. Ya'ni is one of the most beautiful words in the Arabic language. It's really one of my favorite words. Arabs love it so much they say it all the time. Ya'ni, ya'ni, ya'ni. Right? It's like in English. People that say But aniya, ya'na, and ana, ya'ni, it has to, one of the meanings is to suffer. So mu'anat is suffering. So yu'ani from something is to suffer, right? But it's also, if you actually looked at it, it's a muhawala form, yuhawilu, it's to attempt something. So it's to attempt to find meaning. So suffering in Arabic, if you just look at the word linguistically, at what it actually means, it means an attempt to find meaning. That's what mu'anat means in Arabic. Yu'ani, he's trying to find ma'na. That's what suffering is. It's to bring you back into reality. And من ظن انفكاك لطفه عن قدر من ظن انفكاك لطفه عن قدره فإنه من قصر نظره والذي واجهتك منه الأقدار هو الذي عودك حسن الاختيار. I mean, Faqir Bannani said if you could recite in other than the Quran, I mean, it's hyperbole, but he said it would be with the hikam of Ibn Ata'illah. It's like wahi. It's so amazing. But he said, whoever thinks that the lutf of Allah, the care of God, the grace of God is absent in the qadr of God, in the decree of God, it's from myopia. It's from your own short-sightedness. And then he says, because the one who has brought these tribulations upon you is the same one that accustomed you to blessings. In other words, the only reason you know the tribulations is because you were accustomed to the husn al-ikhtiyar. It's so beautiful. So when things go south, the reason that you're aware of that is because they were up north before. That's a very geocentric, Eurocentric view. The Muslims put the map, and I wanted to do a Muslim map for our children's classrooms called the restorative map, which puts the south on the top. Because all the Muslim maps were made with Africa was on the top and Europe was on the bottom. And they switched it around, which is psychological, right? But like the poet said, you'll find out when you reach the top, you're on the bottom. La ilaha illallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. اللهم تقبل منا صيامنا وقيامنا وركوعنا وسجودنا. اللهم إن شاء الله تقبل منا هذه الأيام الأخيرة، جعلنا من عتقاء هذا الشهر يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. اللهم اجعلنا من الذين يطبقون سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم أريني نبينا يا الله، أرينا نبينا في المنامات يا الله. اللهم متعنا برؤياه يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلي اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين.